for joining us for this edition of our Career Conversations series. Tonight, we're thrilled to explore the dynamic and ever-evolving field of corporate compliance. Whether you're a law student, an MLS candidate, or simply curious about compliance careers, you're in the right place. We have an exceptional lineup of panelists ready to share their experiences, insights, and guidance on how to thrive in this exciting field. Before we dive into our conversation tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for the evening, El-Jabbar Riddle. El-Jabbar is a seasoned attorney and compliance consultant with nearly a decade of experience in regulatory compliance. He is a managing member of Riddle Compliance, where he leads a team that advises approximately 40 clients annually across healthcare and financial sectors. El-Jabbar specializes in building robust compliance programs and has held multiple interim chief compliance officer roles, navigating complex regulatory environments and delivering practical solutions. His expertise spans a wide range of services, from corporate integrity agreements and state and federal audits to data protection and privacy frameworks. El-Jabbar is known for aligning compliance with strategic business goals, advising boards and executive teams, and developing comprehensive compliance and privacy frameworks. With a Juris Doctor from Seton Hall University School of Law, El-Jabbar is not only a leader in the field, but also a dedicated mentor to emerging professionals. Please join me in welcoming El-Jabbar Riddle.
How's everyone doing? Gregory, would you like me to introduce everyone, or will you do it?
Please give them a moment to introduce themselves. Thank you.
Okay. Who are we going to start with? Will, would you like to start?
Sure, yourself. Absolutely. My name is Will Simmons. I'm the Director of Ethics and Compliance at Contentful. It is a content management system. It's basically headless technology. My background is all about compliance. Prior to this, I was the Global Head of Investigations for a biotech company, multinational. And prior to that, I worked in the pharmaceutical industry, various positions, quality, manufacturing. And then I was a military federal agent for about 10 years altogether. So a lot of compliance, a lot of different facets of compliance, and very happy to be here and just kind of impart some of the knowledge and lessons learned in the compliance world.
Great. Thank you, Will. Amanda, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Kashak. I'm currently an compliance operations manager at Stryker. Prior to joining Stryker in June of this year, I spent 9 years at Olympus Corporation of the Americas, where I worked a lot within the operations department and then as a business partner. And I joined the Seton Hall Law Program in 2018 for my MLS. I'm excited to be here tonight. Thank you.
And Chris?
Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Vanderwolk. I graduated from Seton Hall with JD in May of 2023. My career has taken me through group benefits. So I'm the Chief Compliance Officer for Savoy Associates. We are a health insurance general agency. We've got about 150 employees across 6 states. And compliance in my space is going to be different than what we're going to talk about elsewhere. I look forward to talking to you guys tonight.
And just to make this more conversational, thank you, Chris. Just to make this more conversational, a little bit about myself. I've been running Riddle Compliance for 7 years. Prior to that, I was a staff attorney and compliance officer for an organization called elin.com. Then I did some work in construction, and then I started my own shop and essentially offer compliance services to healthcare and financial services. So we'll just be walking you all through the challenges, the ups and downs of compliance across a number of different industries and sectors. Feel free to save your questions. We will have a Q&A at the end to try to shed some light. It's a really complex world across these industries, and I think the panelists have a lot of great insight to share. Compliance is also sort of a buzzword, right? And it's a loaded word. So can you guys just share with me? We'll start with Chris. Can you briefly explain what compliance actually is? What does it entail? And why is it crucial for businesses today?
So for me, in my role, in my world, compliance is twofold. There's internal, compliance, where you've got to help your own organization make sure that it does the right things and avoids trouble. And externally, in my role, there's a lot of education. So a lot of our partners that we work with are benefits brokers, employers that provide insurance to their employees. The insurance sector, the benefits sector, has a ton of rules that most people have never read and only learned about with a 3-minute snippet in the news. It's a lot for people to digest. So internally, we've got our own employee benefits compliance, ERISA, HIPAA, mental health parity. There, I could go days on the different acronyms. And then internally, we've also got making sure that we're complying with all the various financial rules that we have to do, that our contracts standards are met, that we meet our own internal security protocols to satisfy all of our contracts with our vendor partners, things like that. So it's a bit of making sure everybody stays out of trouble, mostly through educating people.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Now, Will, how would you describe compliance in your world?
Compliance, I would really look at it as a business multiplier. And what I mean by that is that if you're doing the right thing, as Chris was talking about, and you're staying out of trouble, you're going to be able to more readily pivot and adapt to changing regulatory environments. As you see, especially with the EU, regulations change almost on a daily basis. If you've got the programs and practices put in place from a compliance perspective, you are able to readily jump into those and impart what you have already used and worked on in other areas to these new regulations, and you're able to transition very quickly. Whereas some of your competitors, some of the other companies, some of the other industries may be stymied in the old way of thinking. So compliance is, absolutely what Chris said about doing the right thing, internally, externally, driven by regulations, but really it's a business multiplier. So I think approaching it from not the Department of No or a police force, so to speak, and really looking at it as how to take the business to the next levels is a different approach to compliance. And it's much more well received from your business partners, from your colleagues, instead of you being the guy that when you set something up or on somebody's calendar, they think they're in trouble.
That's a great comment about it being a business multiplier. Being that I offer outsourced compliance solutions to growing organizations, they often see it as an expense and not necessarily a business multiplier. So just to piggyback on what you all said, how would you, and I'm sure you encounter this with your executives about it being an expense, how do you face that challenge with showing your executives that it's actually something instrumental to the organization and not just another expense? Chris, Will?
So, Will, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, I'll jump on this.
Go for it.
So,
Yeah.
Early in my career, I learned very hard that showing the potential, these are the fines we could face, and this is what could happen, and all these hypotheticals carries no water. It doesn't impress anybody because I could get hit by a bus crossing the street. So I learned really quickly that you can't sit there and provide executives or leadership with all these hypothetical situations. You need to codify it and turn it into a way that they can digest it and they can see value in it. And by doing that, what I mean is you're taking something and saying, we have this new regulation coming down. We have these restrictions coming in place. We've already taken a look at what the existing practices are. Here's how we apply these. Here's how it's going to help the business. You've got to find a business sense. Coming in with to bludgeon them and say, if you don't do this, you're going to get fined. It's not going to go anywhere. I learned that the very hard way. You've got to translate the compliance aspect into the fact that it is a business multiplier. And this doesn't happen overnight. It's a lot of behind the scenes work. And then once you've demonstrated that over and over again, those next asks that you have when a new regulation comes down, when a new practice needs to be put in place, you've already demonstrated your worth in that. And it's not a quote unquote Chicken Little situation where you're going to them, oh, we're going to get fined, we're going to get fined, we're going to have this. So it's really about, as Chris was indicating before, education, and then translating that into a meaningful, digestible side that your executives are going to understand, and they're going to see how it relates to the business. So long way of saying, don't come in there and Chicken Little it and tell them that everything is going to go wrong. You need to turn around and take it into something that to how your compliance with this new regulation, this new law is actually good for the business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Chris, would you like to add?
I'll tee into that. So in my world, it's very much saying this is the challenge and this is the opportunity it presents. So like I said, our internal compliance and our external compliance look a lot alike. So we use that as a competitive advantage out in the market. So 2013, Department of Labor was randomly auditing small employers for their ERISA plan documents. We made sure to go out and educate people about what they needed to do and then educate them on the benefits of it. Even if you don't get hit by the DOL, here's what doctors' offices are doing. Here's what happens in the event that one of your employees gets into a car accident. Here's what happens in the event that somebody's getting a divorce and their spouse wants access to your benefits plan. And all of a sudden it becomes a bigger impact because, to Will's point, the mythical instance is how the board will often see it, that nobody's ever going to come and audit me. They're going to see that. And so Al-Jabbar, you can probably tell them, listen, it might cost you X dollars to comply, or I can come in and I can enforce your non-prosecution agreement for 10 times that. Your choice. For the, but it becomes a matter in my world. It's often it's a selling opportunity for our team to go out and take the practices that we learn and teach other people how to do it, and then help it cascade down. And in the big picture, everybody wins.
Yeah.
I don't know how applicable that might be to Amanda's instance, though.
Yeah, I actually was going to touch on that, Amanda. Can you just remind the entire webinar, when did you graduate from Seton Hall, Amanda?
2022. However, I've been in the compliance field for a little bit longer. So I've been in the field about 10 years. I started in my undergrad career actually in college. And being in pharma and medical device, we have similar challenges that Christopher and Will talked about. But I think from an opportunity perspective, one opportunity we have is being the compliance connector. So we're lucky to be in a lot of really pivotal conversations and link information together that others within the room might be very siloed and might not consider. And because people within our department have different backgrounds and have different expertise, they're able to make those connections in a quick second that in those board meetings you might not have for months down the line when you're in a project. So in addition to asking for the budget and to getting the budget granted to you, it's delivering and showing that you're a trusted business partner day in and day out. So they call you and they want you at the table.
Great. Now, in terms of your career path, Amanda, how did you find your way when it comes to compliance?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I am very fortunate in the sense that my career path kind of started by happenstance. So I applied for an internship in my undergrad career that I thought was within the legal profession, being that I wanted to be a district attorney. It's what every aspiring junior wanted to do right before taking the LSAT. And quickly I learned that it was for compliance instead of legal. And I said to myself throughout the interview process, if I have the opportunity, I have to take it and see what it's about. And it was really pivotal in changing my life. And after I graduated college, I was met with do I take the LSAT or do I continue to work? And I was lucky to have a mentor show me the Seton Hall MLS program that kind of fit both sides of what I wanted to do with my career. It allowed me to continue to work and learn and get that really great on-the-job experience, especially being at a company that was under active agreements at the time. And it allowed me to have a lot of the theoretical conversations and understand the policy and the reasons behind it. So I'm very lucky to kind of happenstance my way into compliance, but I'm staying here for the rest of my career.
Great. Now, it's often seen as like a backup option, a backup plan. You know, it's, as you mentioned, Amanda, you wanted to be your high-powered, district attorney, right? Now, compliance is seen as a backup plan. Can we all shed some light? Before we do that, are we all happy in compliance? I know I am. Are you guys happy in compliance? Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So you wouldn't consider it a backup plan, right? So, Will, can you explain your happiness? Just shed some light on how happy you are in compliance and sort of debunk this idea that compliance is a backup option and not it can actually be a primary career for folks, and a primary career that folks actually target from the beginning of their legal education, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think kind of to give context to that, um, I'm a MSJ graduate now, MLS, MSL. I don't know what the terminology now. They've changed it, so but I'm a little bit older in that sense. But for me, my first exposure was related to a compliance investigation at a company, and I was like, "Oh, this is something that's really interesting." And I did not know that companies were doing this. I had no idea that there was companies that had entire compliance departments. I'm not going to tell you how many years ago this was because that's a little old, but the same thing. So I was very interested in actually participating in this. I had a federal law enforcement background. I thought, oh, I'd be a great fit. And I can wholly credit the Seton Hall program for my trajectory in this, in the sense that when I went and said, hey, I want to do this sort of job, they said, absolutely not. You have no legal background. Yes. So I found the MSJ program at this standpoint and then started that process and got my next job solely because I was in this program and had that exposure. And what I found was that there is a network of individuals that recognize that compliance is not a backup. It is a force multiplier, like I was talking before. And I think, and Amanda and Chris, I'm sure, and Al-Jabbar, you can say this, the mindset, yes, corporate wise, has drastically shifted. Compliance is no longer let's just check the box and do it. Now there is ownership to this. It is expected from the public and it's expected from the regulators across the board. And within that, compliance is now having a seat at the table. So it's versus just checking the box. Yeah, we did this because we have to do it. There's that value added. And that trajectory, especially over the last decade, has been tremendous, to the point where compliance folks are sought out now. And it's not just a matter of, covering yourself and making sure the company is doing it. People are recognizing what we had talked about before, in the sense that compliance can move the business forward, be it on the social side, be it on the financial side, be it on the reputational side. Compliance is something that can move you forward. And the career paths are just tremendous, because at the end of the day, and the panelists and I, we've all discussed this before, is compliance is about doing the right thing. It really is. And you can take compliance and apply it to different subsets: medical device, technology, healthcare, across the board. But it's about doing the right thing. How you actually execute it, a little bit different, obviously, different laws and different regulations, but the compliance world has the same backings across the board.
Yeah, and I would just piggyback on that and say, I always sell compliance in this way, making the distinction that we're not just offering legal services, we're operationalizing the law, which is slightly different, Now, can you all just shed some light on what makes it unique, fulfilling, and a lucrative career choice? So it's not only, it's not a backup plan, right? But what makes it also lucrative? It's fulfilling. It's not just unique and fulfilled, but it's lucrative as well. So I think we need to discuss that. We're all here naturally to make a living. So can you all discuss how lucrative it has been to you all as well? Chris?
So we live in a golden era compared to when I was starting out in my working years. Don't let my 2023 JD fool you. This is not the beard of a KJD. So you can go on to LinkedIn or Glassdoor and get a good sense of salaries. For compliance, you can go look. There's a recruiting firm called Barker Gilmore. They do a chief compliance officer salary survey that you can get, and you can download that. Give them your information. You will see that there is plenty of money to be made working in compliance. You have to work. You have to do the job. Nobody's handing you anything. You've got to go get it, and you've got to be a rock star, because that's what it is to continue to succeed anywhere today. But there's plenty of money to be made. Money's a part of it. Another part of it, really candidly, is you're probably not billing your life away in point one. You are Absolutely. Instead doing real meaningful work that you get to dive into. And if you like to do a deep dive, compliance is a good place to do that because you have to digest, you get to help set policy, you get to help set agenda, you get to really work on things that will, in my experience, give you meaning in a way that maybe other things might not. If you go somewhere and you're working on a area law you don't really care about, it's draining. I've seen it happen to people. So quality of life can be really good too. It can be meaningful work, and you can make as much money doing this as you can just about anywhere else.
Yeah. And I would also say in certain industries, highly regulated environments, you probably make more than your traditional attorney, right? So let's jump into some of the skills and competencies that we all have. Compliance, as I mentioned earlier, is a loaded word. I know for me, compliance entails everything from, as Chris, Will, and Amanda mentioned, educating executives, educating employees. There's also some internal audit. There's also some general guidance and advisory. There's corporate training. What skills and competencies do you all use on a regular basis? Can we start with you, Amanda?
Sure. So aside from the great education I got at Seton Hall Law School, I think a lot of the things that
Are you
I think
applying
about.
for a job? Are you applying for a job?
um,
Go ahead.
in addition to that, I think being a good compliance professional is focusing on some key soft skills, which
Yes.
definitely come with personality, with time, and with experience. So I think number one is you have to be open to learning. And when I started to think about like what I wanted in a job and what I wanted in a career, that was like number one on my list. I have the opportunity to learn new things every single day if I wanted to. Number two, you have to be open-minded and you need to be adaptable. It's really easy to go into a compliance job and think that everyone's doing the wrong thing the wrong way on purpose. But that's not the reality. Talking to people, you find out that they're super good. They intend to do the right thing. They just might not do it the right way. And as long as the good intention's there, you could work with that. Number three, I think you need to be empathetic. So again, it's really easy to be in your golden ivory post as a compliance professional, looking out over what's going on in the field or what's going on, in whatever sort of sector you work in. But you need to be empathetic to what the challenges are and talking to the sales reps in my instances and finding out where are their pain points, where can we make enhancements, how does this work in real life could help you be a better compliance professional. And then I think the last one that go hand in hand, communication, listening, and influencing without authority. And all of those are pretty equivalent in my book because you have to have good communication skills to give that education. You have to listen in order to hear what they're saying. And you need to influence without authority because a lot of the time the people you're interacting with, they're not within your food chain in the corporate sector. You don't have the authority to necessarily tell them what to do. You need to convince them that what you're saying is the right way to do it because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, thank you. Now, whether folks are MSJ students, what is the right phrasing? I'm sorry. Is it MLS?
MLS. Yep.
MLS students or JD students. There's always a focus on research, writing. That's lawyers and legal professionals. That's our bread and butter. So Amanda, can you speak to, do you use those traditional research and writing skills during your day-to-day?
I definitely have in the past. It comes in peaks and valleys. But I also use a lot of PowerPoint and Excel skills as well. So you have to be proficient in Microsoft.
Yes, yes. Chris, well, just quickly, what other skills do you use that are not really seen in the traditional practice of law? I know for me, teaching, training, internal audit or risk reviews, those types of things. What have you all encountered or adopted as part of your training?
I would have to say, Chris, if you don't mind, I'll jump on this one, is extreme flexibility. You need to know how far to bend without breaking. And so what I'm saying in that regards is you need to be able to
It would not be a virtual
recognize.
event if I did.
You need
Sorry,
to
it
be
would
able
not
to
be a virtual event if I
recognize.
didn't get kicked off. Go ahead.
All right, there you go. Technology at its greatest. You need to be able to bend and recognize and not come in with a hard set. This is it. That's the only way they're going. But at the very same time, you need to be able to say no and have a very difficult conversation where your senior leadership executives may be saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And you've examined every single possible option that they could do it legally or regulatory wise. And the answer is no. And you need to
Yeah.
be able to be prepared and have that conversation. And you need to be flexible enough to really bend and say, okay, outside of my personal moral obligations, legally, this is what's going to be allowed and this is what we can do across the board. But again, you have to have that spine to say no and figure out and stand by it as well, because there could be repercussions for that. But I think flexibility and I think, as Amanda was indicating, those soft skills are key,
They are.
because you're going to be working from executives and senior members down to possibly the hourly workers that are just there helping. You need to be able to approach and talk to everybody across the board because they all play a part in the compliance program.
Yeah. Chris, do you have anything to add or no?
So I'll echo Amanda and Will's comments. In addition, I would say also organization. If you're going into an enterprise that existed before you got there, there's a really strong chance that everything is scattered and disorganized, and you're going to have to figure out where all that is before you need to produce it for somebody. And maybe that's an internal audit, maybe it's an external audit, maybe it's a government intervention, but organization's a big part of it and getting that together. And then to just put a finer point on what Amanda and Will both said, you got to be listening for what the pain point is for each of those people. That frontline salesperson has a different pain point than the CFO does. And how can you maximize, how can you do whatever you do in a way that's going to add value to each person that you talk to? And if you do that, those are the soft skills, and that's the courage too. You need to ask hard questions to people to find out what their real issue is. But that's where the courage comes in that Will was talking about, the soft skills that Amanda was talking about. It's so critical.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I work with some aggressive salespeople, across industries, and they all always want something approved really quickly. So you have to be able to manage that pressure as well as their expectations, as well as the expectations of the executives to push the business forward. So those soft skills are critical. Now, Will, in terms of industry trends, compliance continues to evolve. We've all mentioned that earlier. What recent trends or regulatory changes should students be aware of?
I think, and I'm going to have a selfish plug here. I'm a data geek. I love data, and it makes the world go round. I think some of the trends now are really heavily focused on collecting data and not just collecting it. That was a decade ago. That was 5, 6 years ago, collecting it. Now, how are you using it? So it's not just a matter of collecting the data, it's having an analytical mindset to address it and use that data to impart change, positive change, onto the organization. So the trend that I'm seeing now is not just it's good enough that you collect this. Now you've got to assess it and you have to go through it and you have to be able to use it to defend what you're doing or what you're not doing. And so I think one of the things we see, especially as AI becomes more and more prevalent, is really leveraging technology to compliance. So you've got two factors. You've got the human factor, which always exists in terms of human nature, but now you've got to leverage that with data analytics and machine learning to see how you're going to work and address these current. So it's kind of really opened the floodgates in terms of where compliance is going to be going. It's not just the human capital anymore. It's also the actual data capital.
And that's a great point. I actually demoed a software product called Compliance.ai, and it's structured for the financial services market. That's the target market. And it provides not only the traditional legal research and regulatory research, but all news, media, white papers that were written in the past 2 weeks. It's very robust. So it's a lot more robust than your Reuters and
Yes.
LexisNexis. So would you say that these software, do you think they could eliminate compliance professionals, or would they be used to, or could we leverage them? What do you think?
I would say you absolutely leverage that. And the reason I say that is having conversations with regulators where they said, that's great. You have these tools.
Yeah.
They're awesome. They collect all this information and they spit out these reports and it looks fancy and the board loves it and it's got all these graphics and everything. Who's reviewed it?
Absolutely.
That's the question. Who has reviewed it? And are you going to take a machine report or a data generated report and make business decisions without it? You can, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you're ignoring again that human capital aspect. So if anything, I think the leveraging of this machine learning puts even more emphasis on the compliance profession to decipher, determine, and then apply that approach to it as well. So if it could be just replaced and say, hey, we ran this report, we have a hotline, you do this, that's fine. That is going to kill any employee morale across the board.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. But with the trend to move towards technology, you rise in with the compliances. How do we use this technology? So I think that skill set is going to be increasingly in demand.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. In
And
terms of,
if I could add to that, but in a slightly different lens, I think there's an opportunity, and one thing that I'm working on right now is to use machine learning, generative AI, all those tools to help with some of the work. It could help answer queries about what the meal limit is. It could help answer what you need to do if you're trying to apply for a grant. And that could take, time off of a compliance officer's plate who's currently answering all of those questions manually by email, by phone. And then it gives them the time and the opportunity to focus on the more complex situations. So there's definitely a value to it. However, it's going to allow us to kind of transform and focus on those bigger, more complex problems, since compliance is, I'd say, 95% about living in the gray and figuring out where those lines are.
Yeah, I would agree. It makes those really tedious tasks a bit more manageable, right? Amanda, let's stick with you in terms of growth opportunities. What types of potential career growth do you see in compliance? What paths or roles do you think young professionals should focus in on?
Yeah. So I see a trend continuing to go in the route of specialization, which definitely opens the opportunity for more compliance opportunities and more niche fields within the compliance world. So I think about my department alone. We have compliance officers who are those boots on the ground. They answer the questions. They give the day-to-day advice. We also have folks who have a monitoring, testing, auditing background who look at the data or go to live events and see what's going on and figure out opportunities for change. And then we have a really good group of training and communication folks. And what they do is help us drive with their expertise how to talk to the people, what their needs are, what are the best practices, what are the best practices in education to help adult learners learn corporate initiatives. And then we have an investigations function as well. So by having a diverse kind of group of compliance professionals, you have an opportunity to kind of work within the group. You could work throughout all those different fields, or you could kind of expand outward and use your compliance skills you learn maybe in the compliance function and go to regulatory and quality and do a similar role, but with a little bit of a different hat there. So it opens the opportunity for a lot of different growth pathways for you. Being a new student, you could pick one and then work with others to figure out what kind of growth opportunities or growth potential or growth projects you could have to learn about the other roles and functions.
Okay, great. Chris, Will, do you have anything to add about paths or roles professionals can take?
I would say expose yourself to as many things as you possibly can, because connecting the dots is a secret weapon that a lot of people won't get. And in compliance, you're going to be exposed to huge amounts of the business operation. And you may stay in compliance, you may move into operations. You may find something else that lights you on fire at some point down the road. might just make you better understanding how the risks are if you decide to stay in compliance. There's a ton of opportunities, but the more you know about how the different pieces and parts fit together, the better you can be at every job along the way. And really, the future is limitless for you. Every company is going to be focused on this at some point, uh, whether they plan on it now or it's going to be planned on for them.
Thank you.
And
Now,
just,
Will,
just to jump on that real quick, my last company, it was a running joke because the business kept stealing the lawyers and the compliance folks for that exact reason, is because they would work with them to get a project, to get an initiative up and over the finish line, and then literally steal them. So it was a running joke. So they were able to transition out of compliance into the business. And it was a win-win, because then when the remaining compliance folks had to work with the business, we had someone that already understood and already spoke the language, so to speak. So there's a diversity in terms of growth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, in terms of advice for law students or MLS candidates hoping to enter the field, are there any additional certifications or networking tips you recommend? Anyone on the panel?
Ask
So
questions.
every
Reach out,
May.
So no, Chris, go ahead. Go ahead, Chris.
I think it's in May. It might be in June. Seton Hall does the healthcare compliance certification program. Go to it. Even if you're not interested in healthcare, go there, buy in, talk to as many people as you can. Tell them you're a student. Tell them you're new in your career. You will meet incredible people there. The professors, the other students, people come in from all over the industry, all over the country. Some people come in from around the world. You will meet great people there. Talk to them, learn that material. It will give you a significant leg up. And as a student, you get incredible access to that program in a way that you would have to pay a lot of money for after you leave.
Yeah, I think Seton Hall is a great resource. I would also recommend, trade organizations, SCCE, ECI, Ethics and Compliance Initiative. These are all great resources. The certifications, whether or not they're useful, that's subjective, right? I think in this field, I think experience is best. But I will say they offer great webinars. They offer great conferences as well, just to learn a bit about different fields. Those are sort of industry agnostic organizations, so you can get a nice feel of different types of industries and how compliance feeds into those different industries. Anything else, anyone on the panel, in terms of career advice, networking tips?
Look at some of the forums as well that you may find for compliance, and a lot of those are Chatham House rules. So you're going to be able to see how compliance professionals from all industries are saying, this is the issue that I have. And you'll be surprised that, be it medical device, be it technology, compliance has these ties that are the same. So no, it is not the exact same problem, but there's an underlying current that was similar. Hey, I approached it this way. But really ask questions, network, reach out to somebody and say, hey, I'm interested in this field. What did you do? How did you get here? What is like that? I have found professionally and personally that within the compliance world, the network seems to be much more open and supportive and willing. Coming from a quality background, I cannot say the same. Compliance has been completely different. I don't know if Amanda or Chris I'm saying head nod on this, but there's a shared kindred spirit, so to speak.
Yeah. Anything else about tips, networking tips, certifications, anything like that, Amanda? Want to add anything?
Can't really add anything that hasn't been said, but just emphasize, don't be afraid to reach out and speak up. I have not met anyone who, at least to my face, has said that they don't have time for me or they don't want to answer my questions. And I think getting over that fear of rejection is the hardest part. So reach out to people on LinkedIn, reach out to people in your professional network that you build, and reach out to people from other companies as well. Don't be afraid to do it.
Yes. I'm not sure which panelist, but someone has experience across multiple, besides myself, experience across multiple industries. Is that Will, Chris, or Amanda? Was it across compliance roles in different industries. Have you all been in the same industry the entire time or no?
I think that's me. I'm the nomad in terms of compliance.
You are, right? Okay. Would
Yeah,
you say that your skill set was transferable between the two different industries, easily transferable? Or was there some type of learning curve that you had to adapt to transition from one industry to the next?
I think from the basics and a compliance perspective, no, that transition was the same. And as I've said it before, it's compliance is about doing the right thing. There's
Yeah,
obviously a learning curve in terms of the industry regulations. I went from a highly regulated industry to a not so much regulated industry. I'm still taking the same applications of compliance, of doing the right thing, of codes of conduct, of things of that nature, implying that. So there's the learning curve from the completely new environment that I'm operating in. There's no change though to the fact that at the end of the day, it's about doing the right thing and it's about directing culture. It's about implying the guidance. And so I utilize the exact same regulations that I utilized when I was with the biotech company in the compliance in a technology industry. They still apply.
yeah,
It's just a matter of how you tweak the language a little bit to go to your executives, to go to your leaderships, to go to your employees across the board, but easily transferable. So you're able to jump and go back and forth quite easily as long as you're able to demonstrate how you would take the basics, the foundation of a compliance program and how that works. Because at the end of the day, it is all the same. It's just a matter of what color shutters do you have on it.
absolutely. I agree. I totally agree. Now, in terms of the intersection of compliance with ethics and governance, and risk mitigation, that's often thrown in there as well, right? So we have ethics, compliance, governance, and risk. Chris, can you speak to the intersection of these things? Are they interdependent? Are they different silos? And why is this connection either significant or insignificant?
So I think I'm kind of going to parrot Will earlier on and talk about how it is a business multiplier, and one of those things. So good governance makes for a more valuable company, and one of those things that people that might be new to the work world will learn when they come out if they haven't been in it, or people who have been in it for a little bit have seen it, regardless of what sector they're in, is that merger and acquisition activity is everywhere. Every sector, there's consolidation. There is a lot of private equity capital buying up businesses through whatever tire shops, donut shops, accounting firms, you name it. And good governance makes your business more valuable. So maybe your CFO doesn't think you'll ever get penalized, but they probably are thinking about an exit. And so maybe that's a way to talk to them. And good governance means making sure that you're following all the rules so there's no surprises. So that when you go to package up that deal and move it on, you can say, yeah, we have no outstanding claims. And we have all of our paperwork is in a nice bow right here. Here you go. That drives multiples, and those are words that will speak to a lot of people. Now, if people are building for perpetuity, if they're building for they want to build a company that they want to work at forever, if you've got a sole proprietor, they don't want their prosperity taken away because they forgot to do something the right way or didn't know to do it the right way. So good governance makes for a good company.
Right. Good. Thank you. Now, in terms of the future compliance, we all have our opinions about that. We mentioned AI, machine learning, making things a lot easier. What types of trends do you see over the next 5 to 10 years affecting corporate compliance? We'll start with you, Amanda.
So I think from a career aspect, there's a continued trend towards not requiring a JD in order to be a compliance professional, looking at the MLS or the MSJ degree as something that is seen as good experience. And in addition to that, some of the other certifications that we talked about as well.
Great. Chris, what do you think?
I don't see there being any less demand anytime for the rest of my life. And to speak to Amanda's point, I think that at least my experience, I went through the same classes that the MLS students go through. I took a lot of them. They were hard classes. And so I think as more people with JDs are aware of what the course curriculum is like for MLSs, they'll there will be an even broader understanding of the value of that degree because it's the same legal education. You're learning the same thing. I took the same HIPAA class that the people in the MLS program take.
Yeah.
And so that's going to continue to add value there. But I think it's just there's going to be more and more work as we look for the future. And one of the things we talk about is we can't find compliance people. We have to grow them. So
Yeah.
when we find somebody who knows what they want to do and they want to do this, it's a huge advantage when we're looking to fill a position.
Yeah, absolutely. And Will?
I think what you're going to continue to see, or at least I've seen, is the need or the desire to become nuanced and basically blaze trails.
Yeah.
So compliance a lot of times is just throw it over here. We'll throw it on this side and let compliance handle it because the business doesn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
You look at AI, you look at some of the regulations coming through. I think there's opportunities to continue to be the forerunner to it and to blaze the trails in terms of how it's handled. You look at privacy, data privacy. Chris, I'm sure, can speak to this in terms of the evolution of how that came about. I mean, I remember when credit cards used to have your full credit card number on the receipt. That's obviously changed. And I use that as an example, not to demonstrate my age, but to say that has obviously evolved. In the compliance world, it's evolved as well, and it's going to continue to evolve. And there's a real opportunity, I think, for as new laws come aboard or as new technology comes on board to really say, this is how we're going to handle it in a compliant manner. And then also to look at lessons learned and say, okay, this company did this. It did not work out. They ended up on the wrong side of where we don't want to be. Let's adjust and go from there. So the continued expansion and the ability to really write your own book is something that I think will be a continuing trend.
Thank you. Thank you all. Now we want to open the floor up to folks who have questions. This was just to guide the conversation a bit at a high level. So Gregory, do you have any questions from?
Absolutely. First of all, I just want to say that all of the panelists, you all have been very engaging, dropping jewels, and you've really sparked the mind of our audience here. So we got over a handful of questions, and I'm going to start with a question here from Christine Smith, who says, what changes would you all like to see in the industry of compliance at this point in time?
Or budget.
And that's a good one.
Or budget. Because of the world that I'm in, I would love some more consistency. We had an election a week and a half ago, and that means that all of our targets will be different in January than they are right now. And that's a cycle we go through. And so more consistency would be appreciated because when that big policy shift happens periodically, whether you like the change to or from, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of expense that comes in shifting your focus and having to now emphasize something different.
Amanda?
Yeah, it's hard to think of anything better than more budget at this point.
Yeah. I would say, Will mentioned he mentioned something earlier about compliance being very critical now, and we have a seat at the table, but I think that's not absolute. I think we still need a bigger seat. I think we have to really push compliance a bit more. I say, especially in growing organizations. I usually work at organizations between 100 with employees between 100 employees and 2,000 employees. And a lot of smaller companies, they're heavily regulated as well. And compliance to them is an expense, So I'd like to see compliance being pushed more aggressively with smaller organizations as well.
I think it would like to be, one of the things is the highlight reels of it. If you look at in terms of a company's ESG programs or sustainability or anything else, you see it highlighted and tutored. I think that there's some of these things that, yes, there needs to be some more recognition for the companies that are going above and beyond and preventing. And I think that highlight would be something that would just kind of spur it on a little bit more. I don't think it changes necessarily the desire of compliance professionals, but I think it would certainly raise the level, again, as a force multiplier when other companies are saying, oh, our competitor just got lauded for doing this. We should try to emulate that.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Kimberla X, how often are you all using your investigative skills?
Every single day. So
Yes.
one of my mentors had a really great phrase that I use daily. Help me understand. And when you start with that phrase or some variation of that, it comes at it from a help me understand where you're coming from, what you're thinking in a non-aggressive way, what you're trying to do. And you're investigating it from the sense of you're trying to figure out what the wants, the needs, the desired outcome is, instead of necessarily saying, hey, I'm investigating this person because they went over the meal limit. I think you have to have an investigative mindset to be a good compliance professional.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd say for me, although I'm transitioning out of advising exclusively because my firm is growing, when I was advising full time, I saw investigative skill. Well, I use investigative skills a lot across privacy, so privacy investigations, internal audit and risk assessment. You're tracking trends, so there's some investigative work in that as well. And I think training, a good training program, what you're going to do is take a look at trends and patterns at your organization. So it's not only workplace investigations in terms of sitting folks down and interrogating and taking the drafting an investigative report. The skill set is employed across compliance. Once you're a compliance professional, you're using that skill set, whether you're training an audience and looking at the trends that led to that training, whether there's a data breach and you have to conduct a risk assessment to identify that. There's always a little bit of forensics a part of your compliance role, I would say, and responsibilities.
And Al-Jabbar, I wanted to kind of dovetail on what you had said in terms of the actual investigations of malfeasance or violations. Just being fully transparent, some of those are not for the faint of heart. And you're going to have situations where your outcome or your investigation is going to directly affect the livelihood of an individual or individuals as well as their family across the board. And that could be as serious as criminal prosecutions as well. So that's something that I think compliance, and not to scare anybody away, some people may be even more interested in now in that regards. But that's one of the things is these investigative skills. It doesn't matter how you're applying it. It needs to be the same thing that Amanda was saying, is help me understand. Help me understand. It's not a matter of just saying you did the wrong thing and we have proof. It's why'd you do it? So I would absolutely agree with the investigative skills being used across the board. It just really depends on the context, but the ultimate question should be what's going on, why, and how help me understand.
Excellent. Thank
Yeah.
you. Oh,
Yeah, the whole reason the field exists is because there's a more comfortable way to do this that sometimes hurts people, regardless of what the industry is. There's an easier way to do this that would hurt somebody. Maybe it costs them money, maybe it takes their life or their physical abilities away. But there's an easier way to do this that would hurt somebody. And so we have rules that say you can't do it that way. And so knowing what those competing pressures are and getting to it. And I really like the Toyota 5 whys method. And you can't just sit there and ask why 5 times. You're going to get really just odd looks and refusals. But 5 whys means if you ask why 5 times, you'll really understand the root of it. So why did you bribe that foreign official? Well, it wasn't because I needed to make the sale. It's because I was going to lose my job if I didn't make the sale, and my wife would leave me, and my kids would lose the school they go to, and it's all those things. So it's figuring out what's really driving the behavior. If you're working in compliance and you've got a sales team that is out doing bad stuff, you need to know that sales teams are coin operated. and your comp plan could be driving that. And it's not just one bad apple. It's what is your company doing and signaling to them that they should be doing what's most important. So yeah, absolutely. It's a broader investigative sense for me than it is specifically going into one person more often than not, but 100%.
And another layer to that, trust but verify. So trust what they're saying, and that's their intention, but verify. And at the end of the day, it's going to come down to company records to some respect. So make sure you go into that system that they're saying was broken and see if there was a log saying, hey, it was broken that day, and that's why I couldn't update the date. Or looking at the sales contract to see what the sales contract that they signed really said. So you have to use them hand in hand.
Thank you. Alfredo asks if there's a difference in the benefits between having a JD and an MLS in the compliance field. Does one outweigh the other?
I can speak from the sense of not having a JD and having an MLS or MSJ or however you do it. In terms of investigation, I was still able to exercise privilege on investigations. I was working with an attorney across the board. Some of the job roles that we have looked at have been saying, hey, we don't need another lawyer. We want somebody with a different skill set, a different backgrounds. So I think it really depends on the needs of the company and the strengths of the company. Some companies are very heavily into the JD set, and you can't get into compliance unless you have a JD across the board. But I don't think there's a right answer here. I think it depends on the nature of the industry, what they're looking for, the role specifically. But that's just my 2 cents.
I would agree. There's going to be a perception sometimes with some people, but that's every job everywhere. They might not like your hair or your face or your name or that you got a Philly accent or whatever. But ultimately, in the compliance role, as a lawyer, I'm admitted to the bar. I can't exercise privilege as a chief compliance officer. Nothing I do is privileged communication in that role. So ultimately, when you're in a compliance role, you're not practicing law. You don't have that. So it doesn't make a difference functionally in the role. It may make a perception difference, but many times that's going to happen anyway for any number of reasons.
Yeah.
They could cut against you actually in some cases to have a JD, I think, because there might be somebody who says, we don't, like Will said, we don't need another lawyer, or you might get pigeonholed in as somebody who isn't really a compliance person. And maybe will be willing to jump as soon as you can get a law firm job or something like that too. So it could go either way. People have their own preconceptions. I think you have to address the world as they have those and look for the right lid to your pot.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think as these programs continue to develop, evolve, and become more well known within the industry, you're going to continue to see that shift. But if you see a JD that says JD only, reach out to that talent acquisition person and say, hey, I don't have my JD. I have an MLS. I have an MSJ through Seton Hall. And send a link to what the description of the program is and say, is this something you would be open to, and continue to challenge that, because it will continue to evolve. It'll just take time.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great point, Amanda. I don't want to just focus in on MLSs, but just for a second, employers aren't always familiar with what an MLS is or MSJ, Masters in Jurisprudence. Will or Amanda, have you experienced that? And if so, how have you dealt with that?
I think I've had to explain the MSJ on my resume or my in discussions or interviews more times than I can count on that. I basically say it's kind of like a law degree for non-lawyers. I am not a lawyer, but I take these classes and I took this. So really having an idea of the curriculum and being able to translate that into terms that either the other lawyer can readily understand, or in the case of the human resources partner or the business partner that you're speaking with, is explain what it is. But to Amanda's point is I think there's a lot more people. When I first started applying, nobody knew what an MSJ was. I think that shift has been tremendous in the sense that folks understand it now across the board. But just be prepared to have a background. Just don't say, "Oh, it's just a degree." Explain why it is something that would be effective to the role.
Thank you. Amanda?
Yeah, and what I always say is it allowed me the opportunity to really do a deep dive on the curriculum that I was most interested in, without having to spend my time or resources learning about other things like criminal procedure. Definitely didn't want to take that again, like I did in undergrad. So using that as a competitive advantage to say, instead of taking 5 or 6 classes in pharmaceutical law, I took 10. And really explaining that as well.
Excellent. Kimberella had another question. She asks, do you feel compliance certifications are helpful, or is your degree sufficient, whether that be a JD or an MLS?
In my experience, I think it depends. I think it depends on the certification, right? I think a lot of the privacy certifications from IAPP are great. I think those can definitely add a little additional knowledge base. I know for CAMS, anti-money laundering, those are great certifications as well. It just depends on the industry. It depends on the role and the responsibilities. But I would say there are some out there that, are not that great, but some are.
I would say
And I would
work on the program you're in now. Worry about certifications later. And when you want to know which ones to look for the jobs you really want. Look for the one that's 2 or 3 jobs down the road and see if it says that there's a certification required in those job postings. So maybe you're not at the point in your career where you're looking to go be the chief compliance officer of a bank, but look and see if there's one in there, or for a hospital or things like that. And then put that on your path. But focus on what you're doing now, because you're getting a legal education, and that's going to serve you forward for the rest of your life.
absolutely, I could not agree with Chris more on that. Is get those experiences, because you may get a certification and then get exposed in your role to something else in compliance and be like, "Oh, this is what I love. This is what I want to do." So get your feet wet, so to speak, before. I think Chris's advice was great. Is look down the line, and don't pigeonhole yourself.
Both very good points, which is a great segue into our next question. What kinds of roles should one be targeting in compliance, whether they be entry level or mid to senior level?
I think this one is it's really dependent on the background, on your background, and what experiences you have, and what other avenues you can bring into a compliance role. So obviously, there's compliance roles where you need experience with government investigations, or fraud, or federal investigations and things of that nature. Other roles are looking for, hey, we need someone that can understand the business and apply a compliance touch to it. So it really depends on the nature of the role. I can speak personally for myself. Is I came in as a specialist because I had federal law enforcement background, but no corporate compliance background. So I was able to check my ego, so to speak, and take a step back to get that entry. And best thing I've ever done was take that step back and level set and say, this. And then once I got into it, that was it. As we talked about earlier on the call, compliance is where I'm going to be.
I'll give a little bit of a different take. One of the things that has helped me, as I've just some life advice, is I dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome for a long time, until I got into more and more elevated rooms and realized how many people had no idea what was really going on. And so you don't want to be that person in compliance. You don't want to be out over your skis and not know what you're doing. But if you know that you are competent and diligent, and you will put in the work that it takes, and you have the skills for a position, don't tell yourself no. Let somebody else tell you no. Go out for it. If you're ready for that next step, you're never going to know everything you need to know for any job. There is not a day that goes by, there's probably not an hour that goes by that I'm not researching something because I don't remember exactly what it is or don't know with any certainty what it is. You're never going to know everything you need to know. So if you feel like you're ready for that next step, try it. Take the step and be humble when you get there and ask questions. People will help you. Let people know when you don't know something, and they're happy to help.
Thank you. Did anybody else have anything to add there?
I'll add a little insight. I see the question. I see the top portion of the question as well about compliance adjacent experience. I'd say start with with an organization that's a smaller organization. If you have compliance adjacent experience and you want to pursue a managerial role in compliance, I'd say go to a smaller organization where you can wear a few different hats in compliance, right? First, build up some experience as a compliance professional, and then I would pivot to a larger organization if that was your goal.
That's great
Excellent.
advice.
Excellent. And there are some additional questions in the chat, but I do believe that the panelists have answered those questions in their responses and like answered a few at a time. So with that, we're going to wrap up. I want to thank you. First of all, thank the panelists for sharing your invaluable insights today. You are all amazing. And I also want to thank our audience for joining us in this engaging discussion on corporate compliance. As we wrap up, just some key takeaways from our conversation tonight. Compliance is certainly a business multiplier, right? So it's not just about adhering to regulations, but it's about driving value and the growth of organizations. To excel in this field is crucial to articulate to businesses how compliance with certain laws can benefit their bottom line, right? As compliance connectors, professionals in this space have the unique ability to bring together diverse perspectives, facilitating pivotal conversations that align legal requirements with business objectives. Compliance is a main career option. We want to emphasize that compliance is not a backup. It offers the opportunity to operationalize the law in a way that drives strategic impact. There are lucrative opportunities in this field, and we need to understand that, especially for those skilled in collecting and analyzing data to affect change. And then lastly, leveraging technology and compliance is becoming increasingly important. So being able to help organizations stay ahead of regulatory changes and optimize their compliance programs is essential. We do hope that this session has inspired you to explore the dynamic and rewarding world of compliance. We thank you all again, and we look forward to seeing you all at our next Career Conversations event. We hope that you all have a great evening. Thank you.